Huh?
Yeah, make the fight. Yeah. Oh, I did not.
Yeah, we still have our.
I read. Okay. Oh yeah.
The other part, can you actually mention him and his slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take it away from you, but I just need it for.
You want me to stack it up?
Yeah, make sure you just.
Or hold it? Still bright.
All right. Yeah, I'll.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. This is our very first WebXR Meetup here. And we haven't done anything in person, so things are not super smooth. Sorry about that. But thanks for coming. We'll have a great evening. First, we'll have Nick talking about AR in this 8 wall. And then we'll have AR in Diego having one person. Bathrooms are located on the left. If you need anything, I and Microsoft or Alex or lots of Thank you. Okay, thank you for our sponsor, for pizza.
Can you focus? Can you focus?
All right, can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
All right. So thanks, Aishigo, for putting this all together and organizing this here today. It's been a long time since I've been out to one of these in person, and it's great to see everything starting to come back. It's really exciting. My name is Nick. I lead engineering at AFLAW. As many of you know, we recently joined Niantic, and but we still have AFLAW as a brand, as a product, and we are as committed as ever to AR on the web and VR on the web and everything associated with that. And so, today I wanted to give you an update about what's been happening with web and AR in particular and why people are really excited about it. For those of you who are less familiar with AFLAW, I'm going to just give a little bit of an idea of what our product is, and then I want to spend the rest of the time talking about where we see the metaverse going in with respect to the web and headsets and everything else. So, AFLAW historically has really been associated with web AR. We had the first native JavaScript SLAM engine that powered AR on the web, and that has led to a lot of really cool use cases. So we see a lot of use cases for things like web AR in fashion. A lot of fashion brands are really interested in web AR. We see a lot of web AR for commerce, particularly automotive, is a great segment for getting to know and see cars without necessarily traveling to a dealership. We see a lot of web AR for beauty type use cases, for toys and games. There's been a lot of Lego experiences. Lego has done activations for products and in stores, and is really excited about all the fun use cases. This was a Diagon Alley kind of walkthrough where you get to see all the cool stuff that happens in Harry Potter's Diagon Alley. Sports and live events we've seen a lot of. There was a Pepsi halftime show, streaming live in volumetric 3D through WebXR. Music, a lot of interest from the music space. Movies, food and beverage. Here you see a rapper singing the song Whopper on a Whopper, and so that was a fun experience. This one, Pizza Hut actually they wanted to do an experience where, when you would go to the pizza parlor, you would have these arcade machines, and they really wanted to replicate that kind of experience in the home delivery. And so they had this idea of what if we could turn all of our pizza boxes into these Pac-Man arcades that you used to go out and play in the pizza parlor. And so that was really fun. Wine and other kind of spirits are a big category. Here you have Snoop Dogg giving you advice and wisdom from wine bottles. And in general, we've seen a lot of interest from brands and commercial kind of experiences at 8th Wall. And it's been a really growing business for us, and we've been really excited to see it. So brands have been really excited about 8th Wall in particular, but WebXR in general, because of its scale. It reaches a lot of people on a lot of devices. The web can work on smartphones, it can work on computers, but also increasingly it works very well on AR and VR headsets, thanks really to the efforts of people who are in this room. People who are at Microsoft and Facebook, Oculus, or I guess Meta, who have been really pushing the boundaries of what you can do in this space. We love the web because it's really frictionless environment. You can just send somebody a link and they can access it instantly. They don't need to go to an app store to download content. And developers and brands love it too because you basically can bring your own content, your own guidelines. You don't have to wait for release cycles. You can launch your experiences and update them on your own schedule. You don't have to wait for any gatekeepers. The web is a really powerful place because you can bring in any kind of third-party library or API into your website and just basically get superpowers very easily, very quickly. And increasingly, the browser is a really powerful, basically operating system for delivering really rich interactive experiences. And it's amazing to see what the web has become. Let's see. So in marketing use cases, for WebXR, we're really seeing kind of demonstrable, measurable success with WebXR type engagements. Users engage with content and brands for a long time. In e-commerce sites where you're trying to sell a product, there's a huge uplift in conversions and also an increase in sales. So it's been a really good way for different people in the ecosystem to tell their stories and engage with users in new and exciting ways. So that's why we love WebXR. But what is 8th Wall and what does it do for developers? So for those of you who don't know 8th Wall as well, we have several core augmented reality products. One of them is World Effects, where we are able to place content in the world. One of them is Image Targets, where we anchor content to images, for example, this pizza box. And the third is Space Effects, where you can do things like virtual try-ons and that sort of thing. And so, that technology is just the beginning. Really, as we started, we found that there were many barriers to getting experiences out there on the web that were not just related to the code that we wrote. And so one of the things we found is that the developer experience for web-based AR in sort of its common use case was a little bit kind of clunky and non-ergonomic. You had to do things like run local servers in certain network conditions that can be problematic because you need to connect to them from your phone and not local hosts. So you have to worry about things like HTTP certificates when you don't really need to do that. But also for device-first development, things like the debugger experiences are just a little bit challenging and difficult. So what we built was a web-based editor where you can basically serve in the right way your development project from the cloud with all the correct certificates, but also then have a bidirectional debugger that is streaming all of the information and data from your device, all of the logs and so on, and so that you don't have to mess around with like plugging in your VR headset or your phone to your computer, and it makes the development experience a lot more seamless. We also found that hosting was a challenge for many of our customers. Getting your content online, especially for a brand, can be very challenging if you have to deal with their IT departments and approvers and that sort of thing. It's like an app store of a different kind, where you have a lot of people who stand in between you and your end users. And so we built instant publishing, where anybody can publish their experiences to the world, distributed across the globe at 300 points of presence, and have low latency serving. And so, it's really shortened the gap between the code that you write and the users that you reach. We've been experimenting a lot with inline embeddable kind of formats where, within the context of a web page, without even jumping out of the experience, you can see, products or content in your space. And it's a very natural, fluid, powerful, and engaging medium for discovering and engaging with products. And then finally, on our AFOL.com itself is turned into a discovery hub to find and engage with cool web-based AR content. And so all of these are different experiences built off of AFOL, and you can find many of them on our website and either learn more about them or even try them out. We also have built a code hub for just learning about how to code different kinds of examples, lots of kind of interesting starting places for your projects, so that you can just hit the ground running and level up very fast. And so that's AFOL, but really what we're here today is to talk about WebXR and what is AFOL's take on WebXR. And we've talked a lot about web AR and mobile phone AR, and what is needed to then take this sort of burgeoning category and bring it to the devices that we're all really excited to see in the world. And so for this, we want to take a step back and think about responsive design. And back in 2010, you had this sort of like bifurcation between mobile sites and desktop sites. And basically everything was coded as a mobile site and a desktop site. And then suddenly Apple came out with an iPad and was like a mobile site or a desktop site. It didn't fit into one of these like clean categories. And this really kind of spurred a new kind of design thinking around responsive design on the web. And so we think that a new kind of design thinking is needed today to basically extend to all the different form factors that we have today, so that you don't have to redesign every experience for mobile web, for desktop, for VR headsets, for AR headsets. Really what you want is a single kind of core experience that expands to each of these different surfaces and makes the most out of it. And if you want to then go and take that core experience and really tailor it a little bit to each of the different platforms and take it even further, we want to give you that ability. But the core principle should be that it's, from a single starting place, you can reach all of these different surfaces and expand in a very natural way. And so Eighth Wall has a very particular approach to this problem, which is a little bit different than what we've seen from other kind of categories in this space. So first of all, a lot of existing extended or mixed reality SDKs are number one based off of native form factors, but then a lot of them are also headset first and not mobile first. And what we see is that the way to reach users and the form factor that we really want to optimize for is the device that everybody carries with them every day. And so what we really want is to be able to take all of these amazing experiences that developers are already creating and get them into the headsets of the future, rather than asking developers to start with the headsets of the future and then find a way to then bring those experiences back to the users today. And so we set this challenge for ourselves of what would it mean to take mobile web AR experiences and make them work really well on headsets, and what would we have to build in order to do that? And so back in November, we launched what we call metaversal deployment with an upgraded version of our Eighth Wall engine. And so what does this look like? So first, it started with us basically rebuilding our engine from the inside out. The way that mobile web AR experiences work, at least within Eighth Wall, is that they have basically a life cycle. Those life cycles are very tied to what happens at the different stages of like starting up a camera feed and then managing its lifetime in every single frame, and then either pausing it or tearing it down and things like that. And so we basically added a few extra lifecycle methods, but then took everything that was driving the camera and allowed different kind of drivers to drive different kind of experiences. So in addition to the camera manager, which is this get user media session manager, we also added managers for desktop 3D, and then also for headsets for 3JS and for Avra. So one of the things we found is that as developers develop for mobile first, they really lean into touch-based inputs. And so a lot of the gestures that are really natural on your mobile phone are things like tapping, pinching, dragging with one finger or two fingers, and then using the camera to move around the scene. And so we had to figure out how to bring these same idioms into desktop 3D and virtual reality. Now, you might think that for desktop 3D, this is, it's already done, but it turns out that a pointer event, like a mouse click, is actually not the same thing as a tap. And how do you emulate different numbers of fingers and things like that? And also, how do you move a camera in a desktop 3D environment? In virtual reality, it's even trickier because basically you have more maneuverability with the controllers in your hands. And so what we had to do is actually use our kind of understanding of the underlying scene to figure out where the controllers were pointing within the scene and back project that into the user's point of view and use that to basically simulate as if the user were tapping on a virtual screen, which is the world in front of them. And so what happens when you use our Eighth Wall engine in WebXR is that we're actually able to take all of these tap-based inputs and have them work out of the box without any kind of changes with things like the WebXR inputs. Another problem you have to solve going from a camera feed to either like a desktop experience or a headset is that, in the camera, the world is your environment, but you need to bring an environment in to a VR situation. And so what we did was we started with sort of a bland, kind of unopinionated, but also a little bit kind of stylish environment. And then first we came up with what are sort of like the parameters of the space that people might want to easily tune, but then also how do we let people just go wild and provide their own unconstrained environments if they need to. And so if you want, when you use our engine, you can either use a default environment with no changes, or you can customize some properties like either the floor color or image, or the sky color and some sort of a gradient, or add some fog or so on. Or you can just completely provide your own environment and customize it for these kind of settings. Another thing we found was really key to a lot of existing experiences was these 2D UI elements for interacting with the scene. And in order for experiences that made use of this to work, we actually had to come up with some really clever techniques to capture the DOM elements and render them to a virtual tablet that you could interact with in the same way. And so this is one of the really cool things about using WebXR is that you're able to take these 2D interfaces with you into a 3D environment. One of the really important things about 8th Wall and WebAR is that it, number one, initializes instantly, but then also provides a comfortable viewing experience. There's nothing worse than like trying to view a 3D experience of a car on top of your coffee table, and you're just like in the middle of it, and then you have to like walk out of your house in order to be able to look at it. And this problem comes up in VR as well. You want scenes to adapt to whether you're standing or sitting in a natural way. And so responsive scale is something that we take very seriously at 8th Wall, and it was really important for us to have it work in across all these environments. And so there are certain kind of experiences that currently are just not going to work on XR, in a headset, but whether that's a VR headset or an AR headset. And so things like image targets and face effects are going to work well within the WebXR spec as if it exists today because we don't have access to camera feed even on headsets. And so it's important for things to be able to say that they like opt out of these headset kind of experiences. And so there's a mechanism for that as well. Let's see. So then when we talk about, how do you make things work really well across these environments, this is something where we give people the power to then customize things based on the particular environment they're on. And so here you see the same kind of software component that's doing a like touch drag kind of interaction on mobile AR, and actually is using an Xbox controller on desktop 3D, and then has a pointing and dragging interaction on VR. And here's just a little bit more of sort of the difference between mobile AR, desktop 3D, and virtual reality, and how you can really customize them to the strengths of all of them. And so to show this off when we launched in November, we worked with our agency partner, AirCards, to build out a fully functional 3D multiplayer game using Ready Player Me avatars and other kind of like external APIs, and that, worked on, first of all, the mobile experience and how can you get this game running on a mobile phone, and then going the extra mile and customizing it in a way that's really fun in virtual reality and in desktop. And it's sort of like a testament to how well this project, or how well these things cross. This project was completed in less than 3 weeks from start to end. And really the developers only focused on the mobile experience primarily. And then with a couple days to spare at the end, they made it really work well in virtual reality and desktop 3D. All right, so that is 8th Wall's kind of perspective and vision for how we get from where we are now, which is lots of excitement, lots of engagement with AR content on the phones that people have in their pockets, to how do we get to a future where this content is available on all of the devices that are really up and coming, and we're really excited to see it. So with that, if there's any questions, should I take them now or later?
You can take it now.
Okay, yeah, any questions?
Do you go with ultra leap controllers as well?
So the question is about ultra leap controllers. I don't know what like technology was used to connect. I mean, can they connect to a web browser through like Bluetooth standards or gamepad APIs and that sort of thing? If they can connect to a browser through gamepad APIs, then you can use them as well. And possibly the controller that we wrote for the Xbox controller might work out of the box because it uses the same gamepad APIs. But if you have any particular controller that you want to specify, then you as a developer completely have that freedom to take it that extra mile.
I had a question about a slide. Can you go back 2 slides? Further back. I think it was around the scaling. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So like, how do you scale the stuff here? Where you, like, if you're seeing a car on the table or somewhere else, like, how do you change the scale?
Yeah. So the really important thing is that whatever you see, you can view it comfortably. And so it's all about the viewing angle and the distance. And so based on the distance to wherever you're placing that content, it needs to kind of fill the same number of degrees of your visual field of view. Otherwise, it will be like so small that you can't see it, or it will be like really huge and you won't be able to interact with it effectively. And so, yeah, that's the basic principle there.
So how does that affect the desktop and VR?
So, for example, if you start an experience and you're sitting down, then the content will be a little bit smaller so that you can see it just as comfortably, and it won't be like high up above your head. It will be kind of down below where you're looking. In desktop, basically there's a single canonical view, which is whatever you as the developer set, and you have full control over that, and it doesn't really change. Yeah.
What is, I'm just curious how creative you guys thought you could help into with the spices. What is your greatest engineering challenge with the moonshot goal here? Like, if there weren't any constraints, what would you realistically want to have executed?
Wow, so the question is around our moonshot challenge, and if we had no constraints, how would we shoot for the moon? I mean, obviously, we're really interested in bringing cool, exciting, engaging new technologies to users, and really improving the kind of interactions that you can do within these AR and VR type scenarios. But I think there are other really big challenges that we're really trying to think hard about. One is how do what is the version of this that scales beyond sort of the current branded content and commercial kind of experiences that we're seeing today, and how do we really push the ecosystem forward to whole new sets of developers and to users? Yeah.
So are you going to support WebXR APIs at one point? Because that would be great for all the iOS people that don't have access to that. And your product.
Yeah, so Aqual supports WebXR APIs today on headsets. And so on mobile phones, we have our own camera pipeline that we've been using, and it works on Android, it works on iOS. And then on desktop, we have our, again, on kind of runtime, but then on headsets, so we have these kind of immersive experiences. That's where WebXR comes in and really opens up the space beyond the kind of 2D thing. Yeah.
So I have a question about the Niantic acquisition and stuff. So you have your own IDE, and they have their, I guess, Unity plugin thing as well as their own. What are you guys thinking of the future? If you want to develop with, their thing, your thing is the idea of some kind of future integration, or is it kind of just two separate channels? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the question is, what's going on with AFWA and Niantic? And I think it's still early days there, and there's not too much that we can share publicly about future plans. But they are really excited about augmented reality. We're really excited about augmented reality, and we're all excited about trying to bring new exciting types of experiences to as many users as possible wherever they are. That includes whether it's apps or web or headsets or phones or anywhere else. And so I think we have a lot of shared drive and mission.
So you developed an A-frame, is that correct?
So eighth wall is somewhat agnostic to the particular rendering engine that we use. We have developed bindings between our underlying engine and A-frame, 3JS, Babylon, Lake Canvas, and any of these work well. But the majority of our developers use some combination of either 3JS or A-frame, although Play Canvas is a significant third category as well.
Jumping into Ken's question, like what is so I've started to recently play with WebXR, and for 3D, there are all these libraries. The only two I saw, Babylon and 3JS. Which is the best one that you recommend, and
I think that different frameworks have their particular strengths. I would say that we at Eighthwall, the developers who work on creating like example experiences and that sort of thing tend to work in A-frame with Vue.js, and it's also popular among developers. But any of these frameworks will work on.
I'll ask them just all programmer questions. So, like, distributed source control, is that like how hard to go from Git to that, or is it just Git? Or?
Sorry, what exactly is the question?
The source control.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have you're using Git.
Yeah. So when you develop on Eighthwall, you basically have a source code repository which is managed for you by Eighthwall, and it you can share it with your team, and you can land code and do everything you expect with it. Under the hood, it does happen to be using Git, although you have not a lot of particular access to that through the UI. It's sort of an implementation detail of the distributed source control.
Just looking at learning curves and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you don't have to learn Git to use Eighthwall. We try to make it very user friendly.
If you know Git, you won't have trouble with copying.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, well, thank you all very much. It's great to be here again, and thank you again, Michelle.
And in terms of the frameworks, we have A-frame available here. So Jika and he's going to answer some questions at the end.
Sorry, what was that?
A-frame.
Was there someone here from?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Next is going to talk to us about what you look for A-frame as well.
Or like,
We can see it. Yeah.
Alright, cool. So hi everyone, I'm Edward Cannon from the web browser on the internet. That's like a really cool web browser from Android, get on the Play Store. If you're a web developer and don't want to scout the internet, you really should. There's a 30 web browser because there's more WebXR, you're working with WebXR. So that's what I get paid for right now on Sunday. So yeah. So I'm going to talk to you about like working with talent and tracking in WebXR. Much of this will be to do with like dealing with the WebXR APIs directly, but I also did write a cool library which I really like. Well, two cool libraries. One which is like framework agnostic for transport tracking, and one specifically for a frame which is a ton more features, which is really cool. The stuff I'm showing you today is like more WebXR, and like WebXR is surprisingly developed friendly. Like once you get used to some of the concepts involved in getting access to positions and different things for tracking, it's really not so bad. So like many frameworks do handle a lot of WebXR features for you because like they need to have a shit ton of code to handle it as well. They have a lot of code for handling WebGL, so like handling WebXR, they might not include that. But if you do decide to reach in and touch WebXR directly, it's actually not so bad. Like the editors did a really good job. Well, every contributor in the Immersive-web working group did a really good job making it real good. So yeah, in order to like get the hand into information, we're going to be using initially the WebXR core API. So the WebXR core is the first bit of WebXR we start working on, and it's just designed for handling like a minimalistic virtual reality experience. But it does have the core concepts we want to introduce today, which are frames, spaces, and poses. We'll get into it a little bit. Because WebXR works by I think not working. There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better. There we go. Do we recap anything? Like I said, snapping internet good, WebXR is friendly. That's the summary of the first 3 slides. Oh yeah, and I hate that. There you go. Summary of the first 3 slides. Cool. So the way WebXR works is that it acts as the bread in a WebGL sample. So first, you use WebXR to get the positions of the very things you're tracking. So sometimes, almost all the time, that's going to be the user's head. So you can render something from the user's point of view. Whatever controllers or inputs they have. And if you're doing augmented reality, like track points, like WebXR inputs, for example. And so the raw information you want to get out of that is a pose. And so the pose is the position, the orientation. As well as P and O, like our first list of pose, we should call it like linear velocity and angular velocity. But anyway, the position, the orientation, the angular linear velocities. And so that's the information you can get out of the WebXR API. You take this information and then we don't care anymore. You do what you want with it. As long as you render a scene with WebGL or WebGPU to the WebXR's framework. So it's like a very pretty low level API. Like it doesn't provide you with a lot of the high level things a lot of people ask about. But if you do this at the frame rate of the device, you will get a good XR experience if everything goes well. Unfortunately, you can't just like naively ask for what is the current pose of the different objects, because it's actually a pretty like nonsensical question. Because like, what does the position even mean? Like, sure we have like a global positioning system, but we don't give you like the global coordinates of the track item. Like they have to be relevant to a local space. We actually have some really interesting issues in the GitHub in the super early days of WebXR, like what happens if someone tries to use WebXR on the ISS? Like, what does up mean? And so we have to start like defining what to, like what, like how to deal with like a global space. And what we settled on is we won't. We'll give you a local reference space and we'll do everything according to that. So first you define a local reference space. And then what proposed is the comparison of one space to another at a point in time. So for example, the grip space from the controller in comparison to the reference space will give you like you can get its position and rotation and like velocities comparative to that space, and that makes sense. But that's still not all the information you need to know. Because the final thing is time. Like WebXR information only makes sense for very thin slices of time. Because the way it's rendered is 1 frame per second at the frame rate of the device. And this represents the refresh rate of the device you're attached to, not the computer or browser it's running on. So it's distinct from the web request animation frame. So these WebXR frames represent single moments in time. And within that moment in time, until you get the next frame, the reference space you're using and the poses make sense. So you can use that frame to get the pose of particular things in relation to a particular space. And when you put it all together, you actually have this command. Like, so here I'm getting the pose pointer using frame.get pose. I use the target range base as an input source. So a WebXR input source is like a controller. It's a slide remote, but you get the idea. And it works. It works really well. WebXR input sources are really useful because, as well as like letting you get access to their particular spaces, like their target range space or their grip space, they also have various buttons on them, which you can listen for events for. So the 2 events which come by default is the select event, which every controller should have, and the squeeze event that many controllers have, but not all of them necessarily will. And you can listen for these events to control stuff. So if you just build an experience using just those 2 events, you will probably support most hardware pretty well. It's pretty fine. But many XR controllers have more than just 2 buttons. They have many buttons and thumbsticks and touchpads and all kinds of stuff. So we have a new part of the API. Well, not new, it's very old at this point, but newer than WebXR 4, and that's the Gamepad API. The WebXR Gamepad API gives you access to the buttons like you don't need to remember this is all on stuff online. This is just ripped from the Immersive-web API later. But yeah, so the buttons on the controller is just like a list of a buttons array. And the axes is just an array of axes and values. It's not very useful. Like it's based upon the existing web API, which I don't want to make enemies, but I don't think it's a well-designed API. All it does is tell you the current state of the buttons and axes. And that's really daunting. Just a list of numbers and expecting them to match your controller. When you know what the user is, but you don't know the precise relation to the buttons. So to deal with that, we made a new, what's it? It's not an API, so we made a repository, like a repository of information. It's called the WebXR Input Profiles repository. And it's really cool because it contains JSON files describing the button and thumbstick layout of and touchpad layout of every controller that WebXR can use. It also has 3D models which are already rigged and ready to animate with the information from the JSON files for those controllers. Like this animation here, I just stole all those 3D models from that repo and then animate them later. But yeah, so there's like a lot of models in there. And so you can use that information, you can use the profiles information from the input source to pick the right controller, get its JSON file, and then you can work out what buttons the user is pressing. So if they're just pressing button 3, you can actually work out that this is actually the X button on a standard Oculus Quest controller, for example. It's really cool. And then you can also use that information to animate the controller that uses coordinate that hand. So they have a 3D representation of the controller and it's animated. It's really cool. That's actually a pain to implement, but it's really difficult. So when using it for my thing, I just stole the one for 3DS. Used for random implemented. I'm not sure if there's one for other libraries, but you could just re-implement 3DS as one. It's really good. It works well. But yeah, the website profile repo, it's on GitHub. It's worth a code through, nothing else, just to see what assets are there and what controllers they have. All the models are provided by the manufacturers, so you know that like it's not accurate for the hardware, they're accurate for what the user has, what the user is seeing in the operating system. It's really handy. So yeah, next one's about hand tracking, because the library I made with hand tracking API and I'm building up to it. So hand tracking works really well in both virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. But working with it can be a little bit tricky. So in WebXR, there's a hand object on the WebXR input source if it is a hand. And if you see a hand object, you can render a hand model in its stead. And in that hand object gives you the position of every single bone in the hand. I can't count that quickly, but there's like a lot. You can use that information to then animate a 3D model of the hand. We even have a generic hand in the WebXR profile you can use. So the commander market actually has some really nice, interesting models that work pretty well. Like I just use the skeleton hands for everything because I love them so much. Yeah, it works pretty well. So yeah, if you actually want to implement the hand animation yourself, that's actually pretty okay. Compared to gamepad, it's actually surprisingly easier. Again, you don't need to photograph this. This is just from the link at the top. So you can play on the WebXR hand input. You can use, so it gives you both like an array buffer view, so you get like a really, like you get a version that's really fast and hard, or you can just request individual joins, which is also pretty efficient. But yeah, it's useful so that if you want to like get one joint, you can place an object on someone's finger, which is nice. And it works pretty well. Like, you don't just get something once you win. So yeah, now we're like implementing the basic functionality of how to use WebXR to get very specific information for the asset controllers. But now we're getting to the fun stuff, like hand pose estimation. So if you know the position of the individual joints, like that's really cool when you can animate in that hand, but it's not actually useful to like know what the user wants to do. You want to know their gestures. So this lets you know stuff like, is the user pointing? Are they making a fist? Like, is that hand most relaxed? And so that's what I made a library for. And this library is pretty cool. It interfaces entirely with WebXR, so it doesn't touch any like framework-specific code. And it's tiny. It's like 28 kilobytes. And each pose is like 3.2 kilobytes. So you upload your pre-recorded poses, and it will tell you the pose that the user's hand is most similar to. And it does this by comparing the angle of each joint of the hand to the angle of each pose. And then the pose which has the smallest sum of those angles is the one that's closest. So it's a super like naive algorithm. I'm not doing smart AI stuff or anything like that. But the kind of thing that's cool about it is that like it's kind of expensive to do like comparisons for every single joint, because you're doing like a matrix math for every single joint for every pose. So it grows big very quickly, especially when you start getting into like large massive poses. So what I did, I put it to WebWorker, and I wrote it incredibly efficiently, so it does quickly, and it doesn't block them in thread. So it does make it asynchronous, so you won't necessarily get, like, if you request what the pose is like in one frame, you might not know until a few frames later what the position was. But usually people aren't moving their hands between different poses in like under 8 milliseconds, like people are a bit slower than that. And you can get away with it. It works really well. It also has some functions, so you can dump your own poses. I've only recorded like half a dozen myself. But you can make your own. If you've got some useful poses, like you can make like poses or something like that, something I don't have already. These like make a pull request and add them to the core library so people can use them too. But yeah, it's really cool. You can also manually tweak the weighting on each joint, but it's like functionality I haven't actually used much yet, so I'm not sure how useful it is. But yeah, so this next section, which I will play video yet actually. So this is the bit that's A-frame specific. So this is the bit I've like been working on the most. This stuff's pretty cool, but it is an MIT license. So if you really like it and want to port it to a different framework, be my guest. It's fine. Because like the handy controller, which is named component A-frame, started out being as like a way to provide hand poses in A-frame and like get them in. And I ended up adding more and more features that we want to do more stuff. And in the end, it handles everything so far I've described before. So it does game tags, it displays tags, it like automatically loads in the model, and it fires events for the buttons people press. So if someone presses a button on the controller, it doesn't say like button 3 pressed, it says X button pressed. The user result says it tells you file it changed for them, and it tells you how it was changed. So it's really handy for abstracting all the stuff you need to know. But that's just like the basic stuff that any good controller library should do. This is like move on screen. Stop.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I can't see it very much. But yeah, let's pick stuff up and but what's the cool fun hack on show off is that when the user moves their hand to something interactable, the hand will automatically get sucked into it. And I totally stole this behavior in hardware designs because it works really well. Like it makes objects feel really tactile. Sorry. So you can't push your hand through it because when you do, your hand tries to get pulled back to the object, which gives it a really tactile feeling. Yeah, it works really well. Just playing it. I like the stairs. Stairs are my favorite one. Like the hand automatically grab each run, and the code for it's really simple. It's really nice. Yeah. And the way it works is that it relies on the human brain being terrible at error perception. Like, we feel pretty confident that we know where our limbs are, but we actually don't, like, not that well. Like, if we can see our hands, like, our brain just assumes, like, yeah, the eyes are probably, like, our like, first source of truth before, like, the muscles and stuff. So this kind of lets us, like, something, like, we can separate our vertical hands from our meat hands. And like, if you don't move them too far, you can really get away with it. Like the brain just accepts it as fact. So like, when you put your hand close to an object, I can pull it away and rotate it, and it's kind of fine. The things that kind of break the illusion. So if you suddenly like teleport the hand, so if you bring your hand close and it teleports immediately on, the brain's just like, oh yeah, that's not right, that's bad. If you break someone's fingers, I mean, not like break them, but like stop them working, the brain's just like, oh, that's not my hand because it's not moving like my hand is moving. If the angle seems to like be a significant mismatch, like more than like 60 degrees, then it's kind of like, my hand is broken, weirdly out of position, but that's not what my hand feels like, then it's going to shoot through, like, not your hand. The position mismatch is actually pretty flexible. Like, you can get about 20 centimeters out of position before it starts to feel wrong. Like, you've ever had done the thing where you put down your pressure controllers and then your hands just drift away into the distance? Like, it's actually like a good distance before you realize that my arms aren't getting stretched. It's actually like a glitch. And the code for it is actually pretty simple to use. This is A-frame code. So you have an A entity with the handy controls. You define elements in there, you define how the data set to a particular space. For example, I set data right to grid, which means this element should stick to the position and rotation of the grid space of the right hand. Useful for picking up an object. The different object, put it there, it's like you're moving.
So sorry.
Yeah. You can set the data magnet to be like a class. So I set it to be the magnet left class. And then any objects who has that class, it will get attracted towards it when you bring the magnet. And then you build on that behavior to do stuff like climbing or picking stuff up or gripping like levers. It looks real neat. And yeah. Oh, you haven't seen my slide pages. Thank you. Thank you. Can you see that? Does that look like full code? Yeah. So yeah, that's just the code for it. Oh, now a cool slide for the last one. It's a brand yeah. That's the code. this code is lifted from the GitHub repo for the project, which is adarosecanon/handywork. And it's under the iframe thing. But yeah, it works really well. I don't know why I had other things with your account interactions. It's fine. That's the end of my talk. I hope you find it interesting. Recommend questions from what?
Maybe we'll set up, you can continue answering questions, we'll set up for questions for the day.
Cool, great. Then I will take any questions while I will set up.
So good work, by the way. This is very impressive. What does it work on? Is the video from Oculus Quest 2 that you showed, or what headsets does it work? Does it HoloLens?
It works on any headset that supports and try to work on HoloLens and work
Okay.
on Quest. I did it on Quest 1, work on Quest 2.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
It was like WebXR. It was work around to support WebXR.
Right. I only own the HoloLens 2 and Quest 2, so that's why I'm asking, because I haven't had a chance to try the other ones.
Yeah.
So
I haven't tried it on a HoloLens 2. I think what I need to do is make that. So if you try to hand back a HoloLens 2 with this, I think it'll try and render my hand on top of your real hands. And that's what if you want. So I don't know how HoloLens, so I don't know that. But if you do try this and it does do that, let me know when I'll fix it.
all right. Another question I have is about the initialization of like. This is more of a WebXR question in general. I'm new to WebXR, so if you like say have an experience like you showed, and the room is like I'm trying it here with HoloLens 2 or even Quest, and like say there's a chair in front of me, and I'm doing whatever, and then I go to another page and come back. Does it reinitialize in a different position? Does it maintain that pose? Can I?
Like when you go to a different page, you have to leave like the immersive section. And so when you go back in, it will put you in the position where you are now. Like it will.
Right, but is north still north, or is it gonna
It's still the same.
Okay.
Because the reference space comes from the underlying hardware. And it will be your position relative to that reference space. So everything will work as you expect.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So we don't have to manage that.
No,
like just
no.
okay.
The WebXR does not work.
Right.
I saw a lot of examples of like web VR, but I didn't see anything about web VR. Is this library or this API is working in Safari? Because I can do a lot of
Safari
the
does
mobile
support
browser.
WebXR. Safari does support WebXR. It will work because they are magic geniuses who do amazing stuff with WebAssembly. Eventually, iOS will support WebXR, and then you'll be able to do augmented reality stuff.
What Chrome or Samsung browser?
Hand tracking is not supported in like that.
Oh yeah, so hand tracking. Hand tracking is only supported on devices that have sensors doing hand tracking.
So it should work on a HoloLens, for example.
It'll work on HoloLens, yeah.
Not on Safari. Not on Safari.
No, Safari doesn't support WebXR. Like,
What about Google Chrome or Samsung browser?
so Samsung doesn't run on any devices that have sensors for hands. But there's actually no reason why Chrome couldn't implement hand tracking with WebXR by doing like camera-based thing. But I don't think it's that useful because you have to like hold the phone and then do this, and that's a bit weird. But yeah, I'm gonna stop.
I actually have a question.
Oh, cool.
Which is like, do you have any thoughts of those cool like tricks, the brain tricks you were talking about? Like, do you have any thoughts of which of those might work better in AR, or do you need VR for some?
I don't think you could do the magnetization in AR because it relies on replacing the visual of the hand, and because you can still see your real hand through the transparent display, I don't think it was super well.
I was wondering if you could do like reverse magnetism or the object.
Oh shit! You definitely can. Yeah, what I just do is when it detects the object, instead I'll just apply the
However much you were going to move the hand, move the thing. I wonder if those things would feel natural.
No, you can definitely do that when you do like yes, you could definitely do that. It's really cool. I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
I have a brief follow-on privacy question. I can just ask it after it's done. It's gonna be a little long.
You can ask it because I have to get Brenda, or that would be really loud everyone online. Actually, like this is the mic, so I'm gonna mute this. You're fine. Oh, great. Cool. Right, I have to get Brenda onto this is the other one. Thing. I'm gonna go back onto single display. Right. Hopefully, a bracket. Yeah. We have random.
Yay.
How do we?
Me.
There you go, random now. Yeah, no, they can see random. So we can.
I can add those.
Yeah, that's what. Oh.
I don't know, can you?
Portugal is fixing the camera.
Well, when it comes back,
Okay.
we'll be able to see you.
All right.
Cool. So yeah, I'm gonna be sharing the questions too.
Is it
We have questions. So yeah, let's do them one first. Like go around and say hi to everyone.
Is that better?
Alex Turner, program manager of mixed reality development platform at Microsoft. I've been working on mixed reality now for 10 years and worked on the kind of initial proprietary APIs that Microsoft had back in their own, like every vendor had their own native APIs. And then kind of that, when Nell was getting, hey, you participate in WebXR and like we need WebXR 1.1, to do AR stuff, kind of just as we were in the process of realizing maybe we need to remove and kind of start over to do this all right. But yeah, kind of from those early days now doing WebXR to kind of push forward to the standards.
I am working forward to a short straw. Yeah, I work with Alex at Microsoft. We worked on both WebXR is passionate about it, standards, and creating these open platforms that we can use and work in our construction.
Hi, I'm Rick W. I work for Meta on the Oculus browser. I work primarily on the WebXR, and I used to work for Magic and colleagues there. I'm working on the adding more stuff to the standards, making it faster and more interactive.
Hi, I'm Diego Marcos, and I held my A-frame since 2015 on Kubernetes. Office WebXR WebXR.
Cool. I'm Inner Canada from Saxon. I co-chair with Bicycle and Microsoft. The Immersive-web working group, which is the standard body, which is standardizing WebXR. Cool. So do you have any questions? Oh, Brenda, I'm sorry, Brenda. We used to that for you on the laptop.
I know I'm not there, but so my name is Brandon Jones. I'm an editor on the WebXR spec. I've been doing this for a good long time now. I kind of started the whole deal with Vlad back in the day. These days, I'm mostly working on WebGPU actually, which hopefully will dovetail into WebXR in the not so distant future and give everybody more performance, which is always a good thing.
Cool. So yeah, like definitely like most of the experts in the WebXR world are here. So a few questions, like these. So, do you have any questions on the screen as well?
Yeah.
So I have a question for Meta. So Microsoft has embraced the WebXR, switching over to that. With respect to like that platform, is that the same kind of approach? Is more and more of the APIs and folks on WebXR, or is it going to be like a parallel thing of private APIs and WebXR? How does that work?
No, we fully support the public WebXR API, same as what Microsoft does and Google does with WebAR. We don't have any proprietary APIs in our browser, and we're not planning on looking at it. If we're gonna add new APIs, we will split them through.
Yeah, that was kind of the bad old days, like 7 years ago, kind of at the native side, where everybody was still exploring and figuring out how we wanted things to be, and the closest to a standard at that time on the native side was OpenVR, because Valve was support through Steam lots of different headsets, but even there, like, they wanted to move forward to kind of something that we all designed together. And so at the time, Facebook and Microsoft and Valve and everyone got together to make sure we were building OpenXR at a native level together, and then at the same time, it was cool to actually build both standards together at the same time, working together on WebVR, which then became WebXR to make sure we're all and kind of on the browser, on the native side, you can still talk to a lot of these native APIs if you want to, because you have direct access to hardware. In the browser, like when you're actually in a web browser, WebXR is kind of the only game in town, unless you build everything yourself, right? Like the way they call us to build it up from scratch from the camera images, right? But if you want to access on a headset the actual stuff where you're getting the 6-stop tracking from the headset cameras that aren't accessible to the page, you end up having to kind of use WebXR.
Right. So just a couple of follow-up questions on that. For example, on the camera access, I was playing around and I noticed in I forget which one, Quest or one of them didn't provide camera access. Some of the things I was trying to do with combining market tracking with positioning didn't work across those components to use software. So
the remote camera access is super new and very early days. Yeah, and that's probably going to take significantly for finally release.
Okay, so is that part of WebXR camera access? So that's specific to each browser they choose?
No, so WebXR is a modular API, and the browsers can choose it like certain want to see.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Android has the raw camera access API. I think it's only supported on Android.
Yeah, like for actually, I was actually impressed for most of the API, like how well we actually got like the same APIs to work across the handheld form factors for kind of mobile phone, tablet AR, and headset AR. Almost basically everything is done the same way. There's ways you tailor. For the raw camera access, we actually discussed that a lot, and that's something you're getting down to that raw level where you're starting to get at the differences between headset kind of see-through AR and other things where you're composing it versus like with a camera, like with a handheld device, you only get the image on the screen because you're taking it from the camera and putting it there, and then all the pixels are kind of added to it. Whereas kind of for VR, especially for optical AR, right, like much of the world is just handled differently. And so it's been hard to come up with one API design for that exact API that exactly spans across. This is the API you need for headsets, and this is the same API you need for mobile phones. So like I expect for the kind of camera access stuff that we may go a different path. Like we may do something for headsets that's more like getting the kind of standard webcam feed, like the user media feed that you otherwise get. Yeah, like something like that. And then like the way we do it natively on the HoloLens is you kind of get the Windows traditional way of getting the feed from the webcam, and then each frame is annotated to tell you, hey, by the way, here's a video feed, and this frame was in this position in the world, and you can kind of get back to that. So that's like one way that we've found success with on the native side. It's just a little bit different in the details than how the raw camera access API works. I think this is still an early area that you have to figure out. But
I look forward to that.
Yeah, so in case of Quest doesn't have a camera, so there's nothing we can provide. Like the cameras are just there for hand tracking and inside out tracking. You cannot actually provide we cannot provide it. Okay.
Similar question, like, so I'm more like new to WebXR, but I've made some Unity apps. The Oculus, like SDK, it's in for Unity and Unreal and native. And so what is the deal with web? So can I make an Oculus app using web technology now? And what are the limitations with web technology versus like going native?
So I know there's you can cross-combine native Unity app to WebXR. There's extensions. I'm not the expert on that, but I know it's possible. People that are successful releasing websites that way.
There's a mostly supported WebGL backend in Unity, and then on top of that, there's a sort of pretty well supported WebXR backend that people built to get. So it's like you can tie these things together to make it work. It's a different experience maybe than you'll get from like building in one of the web native frameworks like A-Frame and Babylon 3.js. But you can definitely make that work.
There's definitely been investigations into how progressive web apps, like the thing that allows you to build apps for platforms, how web technology, how progressive web apps can work with WebXR. But I think that's still pretty early days yet. I don't think anyone's in implementation.
A good resource is the WebXR Discord. Actually, the maintainer of the really plugin brief. Is on that Discord, so you can ask the question.
But is there material on Oculus website like to how to do some of the demos and web technology they don't have?
So in the browser, if you open the Oculus browser in the Oculus Quest, I think the homepage has a list of has a collection of selection of content that you can use.
And that's made using WebXR.
Yeah, and there's multiple frameworks. So you can use Unity, you can use you can use WebXR, you can use Node.js, Safe, there's a whole universe there. And you also have limitations of WebXR. I don't know, I would say like the limitations are there's some APIs that are still not available with web. For example, the pass-through API to get the web is not available, but you can provide mostly everything. I think my opinion is the limitations are pretty much the same. You have like limited number of draw codes and triangles and render. The limitations comes from the hardware.
Oh.
There's one question from YouTube, and they're asking for zero features. Exactly.
I'm going to think about that because I have a lot of favorites. Let's start with random and go around. So random, like your favorite WebXR feature.
Sorry, I'll have to repeat that again. My favorite WebXR feature?
Yes.
Okay. For one, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of echo on this side, so apologies if I stumble a little bit. I think Alex nailed it really well when he was talking about it previously, in that we managed to land on something that worked so well for the most part and so seamlessly between all the different form factors of XR that we were aware of at the time. And like some of it was just kind of like, well, we think that people will be able to deal with this. We hope it will work. And a lot of that seemed to have paid off and it worked really well. So I've been really happy to see how nicely that's carried forward. It makes the API feel like it's got legs for the future. And then I've been really excited to see things like hand tracking on platforms that have it get adopted so quickly and people start to play with it. I was worried that because it was a feature that wasn't going to be available universally, people might just choose not to engage with it. It seems like developers are really embracing kind of the progressive enhancement aspect of the API and taking advantage of those features when they're available, but usually not in a way that just completely blocks you out of the experience if you don't have it, which is really.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like for me, if I think of kind of like where we came from, like everybody bringing their expertise, I think kind of across OpenXR and WebXR, like I enjoyed the fact that everybody brought what they were great at, right? Like so, OpenXR Val brought like their expertise in controllers, so Oculus, WebXR brought their expertise in layers. So I guess I enjoyed seeing the evolution of how we handle spaces in WebXR, like some of the stuff that Microsoft was doing with spatial anchors, and and then I know that Air Core and spatial anchors, and like again one of those places where we were able to come on a design for here's how we can come up with a reference space, and then here's how we can come up with other spaces on top that you reason in. You can have anchors have spaces, and it turned out to work well with both the way that Air Core and HoloLens and other VR headsets all reasoned about space. So yeah, that was I think of those places where things worked out across different form factors. I really liked how we ended up handling all the space stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely a sucker for input features, so hand tracking being one of them, and just because it's like, oh, this is a cool way to interact with things, and we can support it. But yeah, it's I like that, and also just how easy it is to get articulated controllers and all the work that's been done in that regard.
Yeah, I'll just repeat whatever Alex would say. I really like the hand tracking feature. It's super cool to see your own hands in VR. I think we can only scratch the surface about what you can do with it. And I can't wait for more people to adopt it.
Yeah, like hand tracking is a winner. Definitely like the A-frame community went crazy, like amazing stuff with it. And another thing that I think like the AR extensions of WebXR, not many people know about it. And ADA is doing like amazing integration with A-frame, like Lightning Mesh and a lot of new APIs. I think they need to get like more exposure. There's a lot of cool work there on the Google and Chrome side that doesn't get enough attention. So,
yeah, I'm gonna second that with the lighting information API. Like it's amazing. Like it's tricky to use, but you really can make your augmented reality object just blend seamlessly into the real world. It looks so good, and the implementation pattern working on an A-frame is actually pretty not too bad to use. Like there's an example in French repo that you can do it in like a not too many lines of code, and then you can just forget about it and start building something really cool, but then just know it's going to look amazing. So yeah, I think one like similar question from my personal interest, like are there any like new or upcoming or even just like blue skies features that you're either excited about or like want to happen in WebXR or like around again? I think I'm running
Sorry, you muted the local thing, so I've been watching through YouTube. Blue sky. I would really love to see navigation get worked out a little bit better. I mean, we don't really have much navigation right now, but like there's some really basic ideas as to how we can move forward with that. And then there's some further out looking, like how can we make those transitions as smooth as possible. And a lot of it is just kind of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if kind of conversations right now. But if that's something where we can nail it down, we get one step closer to really truly being able to say, like, hey, this metaverse concept that everybody's talking about, well, we have it. It's called the internet. There you go. So I'd love to see that get ironed out and shipped soon.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's not exactly blue sky, but I mean maybe something that's kind of top of my hopes. I hope we can get there pretty soon. Is figuring out how we solve this kind of long-standing thing of getting web views to show up inside WebXR, right? And we talked about this a few years back, and there's certain ways that we might want to do that, like DOM to texture, just rendering to a texture and handing it to the page. We know that there's a lot of security issues with that, but even some of the topics in this week's, WebXR face-to-face that a lot of us are here in town for are around different parts of that. Specifically, hey, web views and WebGL, or DOM, WebXR DOM layers and things like that. Different ways of tackling that problem. And we've on 2D screens, we've tried some clever tricks to get iframes using CSS 3D into the right place, and so we've seen some cool stuff, and we want to figure out how we get that going inside the instance also. So I think for me, that's the thing I'd love to see next. Maybe medium, hopefully short to medium term.
Yeah, super this guy. So Aiden's picture of the TARDIS actually reminded me of this. So I was imagining like, oh, if you're in a VR world and you're walking into spaces and you're on the inside, how do you represent that position? Like if you start doing things like multi-app, you want to have like a good urban space experience between the two things, and like going around the world as well, like with the spaces on you, this and that. I think these are like any other gravity stuff. If you're in a free falling environment or things like that. So I think that stuff is just generally unsolved and interesting. Especially when you start, trying to make a coherent experience out of pieces that might usually not have any shared context or things like that.
So the biggest problem that pretty much all of our developers face is like performance. It's like constant headache. So I'd really like to see web GPU landing in WebXR. I think that'd be awesome. I think it's happening. We just need to figure out the APIs. And then make spaceport nice one as well. I think it's only Oculus Quest implemented that way. So still would like to see it because it's such a game changer for performance. And the other thing I would like to see is like more mixed reality, like savable anchors would be nice. I think we just kind of discussed this week as well.
Yeah, that talk is true. Nice to know. So there may also immersive navigation. I don't know if everyone has the context here. So right now, the situation right now is that if you enter VR mode and if you navigate to a different page, the browser kicks you out from immersive mode, and then the user has to re-engage and enter VR again. So, and links is the core ingredient of the web, right? So and right now we cannot navigate from a VR site to another VR site without leaving immersive mode. So it would be great to have immersive navigation. Yeah, that's my obsession from day one. I know it's hard. Right.
So the question for Brandon. Well, I guess it's two-part, but I'll sooner right there. I don't know if you messed around or you used Godot any. Okay, that's a very short question. But the longer question is, do you see what I got maybe 3/4 of the way through Surma.dev's web GPU article, and some of it was heady, some of it was really interesting. Do you see web GPU as being like a marquee thing where similar to like 120 hertz, so we can tell that has been built with web GPU based on its performance, or do you think it's just going to be forever like secluded to being under the hood, and it's like doesn't get its like time in the sun? I don't know. That makes sense.
So apologies for the delay on the answer again. But my understanding of the question was, do I think that basically is use of web GPU going to simply really user visible? I go to a web GPU site, I'm able to know, wow, this is web GPU. And the answer to that is probably not. You should be able to go and see that it performs really well. But it's going to be something where fundamentally, like if you load up a game on your PC It might be using OpenGL, it might be using D3D, it might be using Vulkan. Unless you are the geeky type who really likes to dig into the driver settings and everything, you're probably not going to know. And generally, that's how it's going to work out for WebGL versus WebGPU. I think that once it becomes available and widely distributed, you will see an awful lot of experiences shift over pretty quickly. Because one, you're going to have libraries like 3D, Babylon, or stuff like that are going to handle a lot of the conversion for you under the hood. Babylon JS, for example, already implements WebGPU. I think it's behind the flag somewhere, and they claim that it's just a bit you flip, and then everything else is done for you, and it gives great performance. I think they posted something recently on Twitter that said 10x performance, and I tried demos and that held up. But yeah, in other cases, like if you were a developer trying to use it directly, I just think it's a nicer API to use. Like it's got a lot less quirks and a lot less than 30 years of baggage than WebGL has. So I think people are going to go through it pretty quickly because of that as well. But to the end user, there's not going to be any flags that say, oh, this is WebGPU. It's just going to go better. So.
Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Well, I think I wanted to end really loud on the thing of features you want to see. Like, I think for me, the feature I really want to see is like I want to see market tracking, which is like more in the short term, because like a lot of developers seem to really want to do it, and I think giving them raw camera access is too dangerous. Like it's for something so simple and so common. And like there's features like which people ask for, like shared anchors, which could like, if not be replaced by like these market tracking, could act as like a stepping stone to shared anchors. So for me, that's like a really important one. I think I added it to the agenda like myself for the next few days. So hopefully there's some traction on that. Do you have any other questions about any website or real time?
Well, I have a question for you, Diego. What I work on is about WebXR, and how many people are working on it for WebXR?
What was the question?
So what are the challenges for you to implement WebXR for A-frame, and are there other people helping you out?
Right now, A-frame, I'm the only maintainer of A-frame, but what I've been doing is trying to keep like A-frame core very small, so it's not overwhelming for me. I'm pushing like out of features to the community to make it really a community effort. And to implement WebXR features, I think it's just like browser vendors. Let me know whenever there's something new code coming in, and we'll put it in as soon as possible. Yeah. PRs are always welcome, but yeah, on that side it's pretty smooth collaboration and conversation. Yeah.
Yes, sir, I keep spamming you with PRs all the time.
What's up?
So I keep spamming you with PRs.
I don't know, like for example, Ada's been like taking on the work on the new cool stuff coming from the AR side of things, and I think you helped at the beginning with the hand tracking guy as well. So yeah, everything's collaborative effort. I think it's pretty nice collaboration, fun. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is like this ambition of like you always want to increase the scope of favorite itself to do more cool things. But at some points I say no, we have to consolidate what we have and to make it like well efficient and bug free as much as we can, and then rely on the community to fill the gaps.
But that community is like really amazing. Like those of you who are new to WebXR or haven't checked out A-Frame yet, like really check it out, because like it's really good like on its own, but the community takes it to like a whole other level. There's some amazing stuff out there.
Yeah, sometimes it's like you say no, and people get disappointed because they can't get this cool component and they want to add to the A-Frame. It's just no. And at the beginning, they are kind of disappointed, but in the long term, they realize, oh, it's much better because I can maintain it myself. I control that code base. I can merge anything I want. I don't have to be waiting for anyone to review my PR. So it gives me a lot of autonomy and to do whatever I need to do. And they become the expert on that part. And then when there's questions, I know who's working on that. Oh, you should ask this person.
Rick, do you have any numbers for web usage for Oculus that you could share with us? Do you have any statistics that you could share with us, like how many percentage of the apps are on the web for Oculus? Or how many, like, is it increasing over time? Is it becoming popular? Is it 10%, 20%? All right. That makes sense.
Although there is a graph with random share, you get the usage information from the CDN from the Immersive-web, from the WebXR input profiles repo. And that gets like basically every Christmas and the holiday that's just after Christmas, that where like people get given presents, like the WebXR users just goes up. But it doesn't like tail off, it just goes up to like a new plateau. It's kind of just jumps up and leaps about. It's kind of cool. Especially when the Oculus Quest 2 launched, that Christmas was just like wondrous for WebXR.
There's a lot of WebXR usage.
Cool, now a question. Let's see how many in the audience.
I just want to selfishly ask if you guys have used Good. Anyone? You have? Okay, cool. I just want to know. Good. Okay.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Does that go to the web?
Well, I guess anything that you create can be ported, but it's not USDC based at all. They're not trending that direction, which is kind of interesting. Anyways.
Is there any, what direction do you want to see, like, the stuff developers are building for WebXR, like, what direction do you want to see it go? I'll start this way, and I'll go around random. So.
You're assuming in terms of new APIs or community?
Like community, what do you want to see developers building?
I just want to see people making a living, like building WebXR content. Like, I want to see the space to professionalize a little bit and have like clear avenues for people to create content and make money. Because right now it's a lot of fun, but it's mostly hobbyists and enthusiasts, right? Which is really cool. It's a lot of fun. But I think I just want to see it grow and flourish. Like, so many people that do it on the side now, they can just make it like their full-time job.
It would be cool to get like web payments or something, web payment APIs.
Yeah, like a paid ways and clear ways for people to monetize, because in the App Store is here, right? So I put my piece of software there, and then people pay per copy. But in the web, it's like it's on you. Like, advertisements, but ads in VR doesn't exist yet. And paper copy is kind of hard to do.
There's someone I know who speaking to on Twitter who has started a business selling billboards in web spaces. And I think they've really started looking into WebXR recently. So
yeah,
I think it's
yeah. So that's in a nutshell. Like, I want people to be able to make a living.
I would like to see more users, more devices, more people using it. And then I think all the building blocks are there, all the frameworks are there. We just need more users. And then I think people start making money. More content will be created. So.
Yeah, I think along those lines as well. It's more experimentation. I would have said we did the killer app or websites that are WebXR than they are in the flat version. But I think the way to get there is just people trying stuff and getting things out there and making things that people can use. Maybe use economics.
Yeah, and I'll kind of build on some of what we talked about before, like with navigation and things, but like I think there's different parts of it. One is like literally if we talk about WebXR, like navigating from one WebXR page to another, but also kind of before the session, we were talking about some related things of metaverse standards, and what does it mean to have content to publish? Am I publishing an entire WebXR page, or maybe am I publishing content in some way that can be consumed, and avatars are rendered like this, and the content is here? Am I navigating the content within the metaverse? I think we're kind of figuring all that out, I think, still as an ecosystem and as an industry in VR and AR. So I think that if I think of what I want to see WebXR kind of as like a core enabling technology, and then figuring out like what does it mean to have standards for metaverse content and for avatar content and all of this kind of stuff, so that we have this kind of rich navigation, not just between kind of isolated siloed sites, but like very seamless between worlds.
Yeah, so as a twofold answer, one is I would just like to see the ability to create XR content to be more accessible. Like there's already some good tools for it. We've got A-Frame, we've got the Unity extensions that we were talking about previously, all these things, but just fundamentally making this style of content is hard. There's a reason why Unity doesn't have as many users as Paint or something like that. And so I'd love to see anything that allows more people to get in and build more content and share it more easily. And maybe that looks more like what Minecraft does or Roblox or something. I don't know. I'd love to get there a little bit more. The other thing that I'd like to see is just a little bit more embrace of the type of content that you aren't typically seeing in the app stores, but a little bit more meaty. So obviously there's a ton of games on the big platforms right now, and they're designed really well for that. On the web, the majority of the content that we see consumed is video-based, and that feels like a fairly natural conclusion for us to get to this easy content to create. And you generally don't want to have to download a full app for that. So that's a good natural conclusion. I kind of like to see those come together a little bit more, where we can get the web beyond the majority of the content being video-based, something that's maybe more showing the statistics, more business uses, real estate and stuff like that. Use cases that you would typically think of going to the web for intuitively, naturally, and bringing those forward into an immersive space, while simultaneously, like I said, making it easier to produce things.
Cool. Do we have any questions from the audience? I think actually we're sitting right on time, but thank you so much, everyone, for. Thank you, Brenda. And see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Yes, looking forward to it.
Thank you for coming, everyone, and please grab something to say about your before you take it.
So Diego,
stickers too?
I'll take a sticker for sure. But I was just gonna see if you want to see if you can spot anything.
So first, what's the issue first?
So this is like fixed scale for a frame, and so basically this is getting a frame and updating this scale.
Oh yes. Where are you? Are you based here?
Yeah, I'm based here.
Oh, amazing. My name is Emerson, by the way.
Diego, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I definitely use this, so it's pretty cool that I didn't know it was just one person that.
That's pretty dope. I would love to put. Yeah, it's what I said. Like it's a community effort, so it's. There's a lot of parts.
I have a very quick
like
question.
physics is maintained.
Yes, please. So,
if I were to start playing with eighth ball, you said you couldn't talk too much about what you're doing with Niantic.
Yep.
So if I was to start playing, would the code go dead in 6 months because you guys merged with? I mean, would it be code that I couldn't use?
No, I think that one of the things that we work very hard to do is to continually maintain all of our existing projects, even as we add new features and APIs and capabilities. We're very conscientious about keeping every existing project working without code changes and that sort of thing. And so, we tend to add features in ways that are non-destructive, but even if things do change under the hood, we try to make sure that they change in a way that ends up being transparent to you.
Yeah, I mean, so some stuff I wrote back in like the early aughts still runs.
Yeah.
I mean, and then that's I like that. I don't know yet how specialized you are. So
yeah. So I mean, basically we give you examples to start from and inspiration.
And so does your code live? The code lives out in your repository system, and that's not. Does that work for people who want to take it private?
Well, it is right.
Oh, it's private to you.
Yeah. So
okay.
Your code is your code. Nobody can see your code unless you add them to your team.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was the part I'm gonna have to go play with it.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks.
So I am more of a AR evangelist. I talk about AR, things like that. And I like two ideas that I think I might put in a blog post around designing for AR, like the responsible AR.
Responsive.
That's a good idea.
Responsive
design. Yeah. Responsive, but extending it to 3D web now.
Yeah.
Or 3D in general, right? I like that idea. And then there was another, I asked the UX question, I like the input mapping.
Yeah.
Do you have detailed content around these ideas?